Welcome to the Backyard Videos. Backyard Professor Videos, I should say. Found this lovely outcropping of red rock. I thought, hey, that would make a good backdrop for a video. Good morning. It's August 2nd, 2008. The year's going by fast, and pretty amazing how fast time goes the older you get. Uh-oh, I'm giving myself away. I'm interspersing some Dead Sea Scrolls with some Hebrew instructional videos. I've learned how to make playlists now, thanks to Still Small Voices. You're all right, dude. My hat's off to you. I appreciate you helping me figure out how to do playlists. You know, I'm a computer guru dimwit when it comes to all this stuff. So I'm going to be able to organize all my videos together in categories that match: Book of Abraham facsimile videos, Dead Sea Scrolls videos, sunset videos, Hebrew videos. I'm going to try to label them Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, and call them all the same. I know in my playlists they're not all even. The first one isn't always on the top of the list and going straight down. I'll learn how to do that also. I'll learn how to arrange those. So I want to continue on this Melchizedek theme in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I also want to analyze aspects of the Melchizedek story, because I think this figure is worth paying attention to. Even though, biblically, there's not a lot to Melchizedek. There's not a lot of information we can glean out of the Masoretic text or the Septuagint, let alone the New Testament. There is an important chapter, Hebrews 7, in the New Testament on Melchizedek. But I have an article here that I forgot I had, and it is extremely interesting in light of this biblical context videos, the themes that I developed in the biblical context videos. This is just more of the same. They overlap beautifully. This is all part of the biblical context from the scholarship. And this is by G. Levi de la Vida. This was in the Journal of Biblical Literature for 1944. Now, 1944, that was long before I was even a twinkle in my mama's eye. And it is an old article. It's, 64 and a half years old. But does old necessarily mean outdated? I mean, if the information that we use in the 1930s and the 1920s, if anything is over 5 years old, is that necessarily outdated assets? There are aspects of information that change through time and biblical research. That's true. But the themes that De La Vida brings up are precisely those themes that I brought up in the biblical context. And this is 1944. Now, the JBL, the Journal of Biblical Literature, anybody who's going to do some serious research into the Bible will probably end up in the JBL reading several scholars' articles out of the Journal of Biblical Literature. You can ask about this and see. This is one of the very standard biblical journals, to be sure. De La Vida says that the name of his article is Elyon in Genesis 14, verses 18 through 20. And he's out of the University of Pennsylvania. He says, the God of Melchizedek, the king of Salem, Elyon, the Lord of heaven and earth, is an isolated feature in biblical literature. This is an interesting concept. To be sure, mentions of Elyon, this name is not linked with the name El, although it is now. We have discovered that. These are numerous in the Old Testament, and especially in the Psalms, where Yahweh Elyon and Elohim Elyon are also found. So he's showing that throughout the literature of the Masoretic text in the Old Testament, the various deities with Yahweh and Elyon have been combined, or the Elohim Elyon have been combined. We know that through other biblical research or through other scholarship. This is pretty much standard biblical scholarship scholarly understanding as far as that goes. He says the idea here is, his footnote's really interesting. He says the participle form of koneh, the Hebrew word koneh that is used of Elyon, the Lord of heaven and earth. He's discussing the Hebrew aspects. Lord and not creator seems to be here and elsewhere the proper meaning of the participle form of koneh. And this is still being discussed. I don't think I agree with him at this point. In no Semitic language does the root koneh mean to create or to make, but only to purchase. And that is also a limited understanding now that we have of that verb, yeah. We suggest the translation of, now this is the verb kana, and this means to create, whereas koneh means more or less to purchase. So the creator of heaven and earth, the Lord of heaven and earth. He's trying to, in his analysis of the Hebrew, he says he would stay away from the idea of create to make. Well, there's other scholars who show otherwise. So this is the interesting thing about biblical scholarship. There is no finality, there is no proof. There are some very fascinating discussions on this, and that's what makes this so interesting to look at. But he says, he wants to suggest, in Deuteronomy 32:6 he says, and in Psalm 139, in both context and parallelism, asa and konain in the former passage and sak in the latter passage, suggests the translation to create. And what I'm going to do in my Hebrew lessons is I will bring out several of the verses that various scholars have been using to discuss this biblical background, and I can use them to build up our Hebrew vocabulary and to build up our understanding of how to read the Hebrew and so on and so forth. So that'll make it even more interesting, because that way my Hebrew lessons have a direct relevance right now with this material I'm using on the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I want to get to these Dead Sea Scrolls with you also. That's why else I'm having you write it out by hand, because the ancient documents don't have typewritten letters. If you're used to handwriting, it will also enhance our ability to read the manuscripts, because they were handwritten. Duh. I mean, that's a no-brainer, you know what I mean? So anyway, he says Elyon is preceded by El. Besides Genesis 14:18 through 20, is Psalm 78:35, and this parallels Elohim and obviously refers to Yahweh. And there's a huge discussion on that also that I'll get to. That's quite the outcropping of rock, isn't it? More on Delavita's article, where he's describing this idea of Elyon and El, he says something extremely interesting here. He says, there is no biblical parallel that can be used in an attempt to understand the nature of Elyon in Genesis 14. Now that, of course, has been superseded. Back in 1944, maybe he couldn't find any, but I've got a study by Margaret Barker that'll really astound you. She does some good stuff on that. He says he must have been an old Canaanite deity, and this is assumed by all students who've dealt with the topic in recent years, and this is back in the 1940s. Well, this idea of a Canaanite deity, that may well be, that's true. If such were the case, and if the epithet of Lord of heaven and earth was steadily applied to him, he must have borne a universality character, far more outspoken than that of any other god in the same environment. The only point subject to further discussion would be the exact meaning of the first element in his double name, Elyon. What does El mean? Elyon might be, at least theoretically, the god Elyon, or El, who is Elyon. El, together with its expanded forms, is the appellation for God in all Semitic languages. That's understood, that's true. Well, with the exception of the Ethiopic, he says. But it's also the specific name of an individual deity, of which the Ugaritic texts afford a detailed, although not a complete picture. Well, that picture has been fleshed out, and the way they fleshed out this idea of El